For a very long time, the Wizard has arguably, or inarguably, been the most powerful class in Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, they're called Wizards of the Coast after all. Anyway, what that means is that the class did not necessarily need as much attention or new toys to play with as some of the other classes most definitely did. Well, now the 2024 Wizard has been revealed, and it looks like exactly that has happened. The class has received some tweaks and changes that I do think make it mostly better, but apart from one subclass, it's nothing earth-shattering. Let's talk about the 2024 Wizard. I'll first state that this video is not sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, and I do not have an advanced copy of the new Player's Handbook. Everything we're discussing will be based on the impressions from the reveal video, combined with what we learned in the playtest and how the experience has changed from the 2014 versions of the class. And I'm also currently on a quest to hit 10,000 subscribers by the time that the new PHB comes out in September, and I've been pouring as much work as I can to stay up to date with everything. So if you want to help support me, I would really appreciate a sub to the channel. Thanks. Straight away at first level, there have been a few changes made. Now, your prepared spells are a fixed number as presented in the class table. In 2014, this was not the case. The amount of prepared spells you had was based on your intelligence modifier. This change just makes it easier to know and remember exactly how many spells you can have at any given time. Also, at first level, there is a new feature, but this is very technically a new feature. Ritual Adept is essentially the old Ritual Caster text taken from the old spellcasting feature that allowed wizards to just cast ritual spells. The team found that this text was often being lost or missed when people read it, so they just decided to make it abundantly clear that wizards can cast rituals. At second level comes an actually new feature, Scholar. This was seen in the playtest and appears to have been moved into the 2024 Player's Handbook largely unchanged. The feature allows you to choose from a selection of skills that you have proficiency in and gain expertise in one of those skills. The skills you can choose from are Arcana, History, Investigation, Medicine, Nature, or Religion. Thematically, this is supposed to be the in-game representation of the fact that the wizard is supposed to be this well-studied and read person, and that has this incredibly vast knowledge. The Scholar feature is a nod to that story element, and I like it. I'm happy that it survived. Next up at 5th level comes a feature that was both controversial and polarizing when it made its appearance during the playtest, but it has been nerfed a little bit since then. Memorize Spell now allows you to swap one of your prepared spells in your spellbook for another one after you complete a short rest. The big concern of this feature from the playtest was that it had the potential to essentially let the wizard always have the answer to just about anything they wanted to on command. The 1 minute time frame and the fact that it wasn't limited to being only usable once per long rest made it potentially incredibly unabusable feature. Now, with it being only usable after a short rest, it's likely better able to serve its purpose, which is to be able to find an answer without completely trivializing an encounter or the rest of your party. The thing is though, unless there are limits on short rests, this still can potentially be used to great effect. Despite the nerf from what it was in UA 7, I still think Memorize Spell looks very good. The 18th level feature, Spell Mastery, has received a change in that the spells that you select for the feature must now have a casting time of 1 action, and one of them can be replaced after a long rest. I feel like this change was very clearly directed at people who always picked spells like Shield for this feature, since it's a reaction to cast and it's now no longer eligible to be used with Spell Mastery. I don't really have any particularly strong opinions on the change to this feature. It was probably a right call for the overall health of the class, even if it comes online extremely late. No mention was made at all of the 20th level capstone feature, Signature Spells, either in the video or in the article posted on D&D Beyond. It didn't really see any changes between 2014 and the playtest either though, so I feel like this is still likely the case for the 2024 book, so they didn't even bother to mention it. And that's it for the base wizard class. A few small tweaks to it and a good feature in the form of Memorize Spell, but nothing that's sending wizard up into the next level, which again is probably a good thing considering how long it has been considered the best class in the game. Largely due to the fact that it is such a huge and varied spell list, as a result it can be extremely powerful both in and out of combat. Moving on to the subclasses with the Abjurer, we do see a few noteworthy changes. Firstly, it's worth noting that all of the wizard subclasses have seen a major change to the Savant feature, which, quite frankly, is a very good thing because the discount to adding spells into your spellbook never felt that useful, and more importantly, it didn't lend itself to the specific subclass wizard feeling particularly connected to that subclass. This has changed now, as the new Savant feature now grants the character 2 first or second level spells of their choice from their associated school. So the Abjurer would get 2 free first or second level abjuration spells, and the Evoker would get the same benefit for evocation spells, and so on for each subclass. In addition to that though, whenever the character gains access to a new slot level, the feature grants them an extra spell from their spell school. The fact that this feature directly provides you with extra spells and does so throughout the leveling up process is a pretty big deal and helps to keep the class feature in line with their associated school and something that players will be able to consistently derive value from rather than the old Savant feature. Alright, now actually onto the Abjurer. The first thing mentioned was that a number of the spells in the game have been reclassified as abjurations, as there were some that just should have been but weren't. I think one great example of this was Healing Word, which in 2014 was classified as an evocation spell for reasons. Anyway, it, along with just about every other healing spell in the game, have been reclassified as abjuration spells, along with a few others. At least that's what we saw in the playtest, and I expect that this change will have made its way through. The schools of magic have already lost so much of their relevance in 5e, and then the fact that so many from 2014 were seemingly placed in random schools certainly did not help that reputation. If they're going to be keeping the schools around, I'm glad to see that we got some adjustments made here. Next, the Arcane Ward feature, also at 3rd level, has received some improvements that will make it much more reliable. The core functionality of the feature remains the same, in that when you cast a spell of the School of Abjuration, you can create this arcane ward that absorbs damage for you. However, now the ward also inherits any damage resistances, immunities, or vulnerabilities that you have and applies them on the hit. So your arcane ward, if you have resistance to fire damage, will also be taking half damage from fire, meaning that it will likely last a bit longer, or at least has the potential to. It does also inherit vulnerabilities that you have, but that's not a particularly common occurrence, and even if it did happen, it's still absorbing some damage. This same benefit does also apply through the Project Ward feature at 10th level, where you can use your ward to absorb damage from one of your allies. However, the resistance, immunity, or vulnerability that's applied on the ward in that case is that of your allies, not yours. On top of all that though, Arcane Ward has also received a nice quality of life improvement in that you're now able to refill your ward simply by using your bonus action to burn a spell slot. This is extremely convenient and allows them to refill the ward during battle as a bonus action and still be able to cast another non-abjuration spell as their main action if they wanted to. Overall, these just add up to be some nice improvements to an already pretty solid feature, and I like it. The Abjurer is always an aesthetic that has appealed to me very much, and I think this certainly is helping that. At 10th level comes a new feature called Spellbreaker. This is replacing the improved abjuration feature from 2014. Now, it makes it so that you always have both Counterspell and Dispel Magic prepared, and can cast Dispel Magic as a bonus action. In addition, if you attempt to counter a spell or Dispel Magic and either of them fail, the spell slot is not expended. This is a very solid feature that definitely hits the right notes for a subclass that is all about defensive magic. Dispel Magic and Counterspell have been two of the most famously frustrating spells in the last 10 years of Dungeons & Dragons. However, it is worth bringing up that in the playtest at least, Counterspell was significantly changed and now targets a Constitution saving throw. We didn't get any word on whether or not this change is sticking around or if Dispel Magic has also been changed, so that is worth keeping in mind. Finally, the 14th level feature, Spell Resistance, has not been changed at all. I think the Abjurer received some very solid improvements that is sure to make the class feel much more strong and more consistent than ever before. Nothing here fundamentally shifted the design of the class that heavily, it just feels better. Next up is the Diviner, which received some very minor tweaks and seemingly only saw changes to the Savant feature like I described earlier, and the Third Eye feature, which comes online at 10th level. Jeremy Crawford made kind of a big deal about the fact that Third Eye can now be activated as a bonus action rather than an action, but I think this change is kind of trivial. The feature did and still does last until you complete either a short or long rest, so whether it's a bonus action to activate or not is often not going to be particularly relevant unless you happen to be in battle when you needed to activate it and made your choice then. So yeah, it's an improvement, but it hardly moves the needle. The nice changes that come to the feature are in some of the options which have been revamped. The Dark Vision option now allows you to have up to 120 feet of Dark Vision, and you can still read any language. The ability to see into the ethereal plane has been removed in favor of changing the See Invisibility option to just allow you to cast the See Invisibility spell. This both grants the ability to see into the ethereal plane, but also significantly increases the range at which you could see invisible things, as before the range was limited to 10 feet. And that's it for the Diviner. The class has always been a fun one, and I think most people love the Portent feature, so I'm happy to see that it is sticking around. The story is much the same for the Evoker as well. The only changes here are, again, to the Savant feature, and the fact that Sculpt spells and Potent cantrips have swapped places. Potent cantrips, though, in addition to moving down from 6th level to 3rd level, has also received a small buff in that it no longer exclusively applies to saving throw spells, but now also to your cantrips that require an attack roll. So now, even if you miss on your Firebolt, you'll still be doing half damage. This is a very small buff, but is better than nothing. I would classify this as more of a feels better kind of update, in that the damage you're adding from half of a cantrip's damage is largely inconsequential, but at least you get to feel better about the fact that you didn't do literally nothing. So I guess there's that. Otherwise, the subclass is functionally identical to what we had in 2014. Finally, onto the Illusionist, and this is where all the fun happens and where we finally get to see some real changes made. First up at 3rd level is a brand new feature called Improved Illusions. This is a replacement for the old Improved Minor Illusion feature, which just gave you the Minor Illusion cantrip and also allowed you to always perform both a visual and auditory illusion. While not nothing, this feature always fell flat, especially when compared to some of the other subclasses. Well, now Improved Illusion still does both of those things, but it also does so much more, including now letting you cast Minor Illusion as a bonus action. Firstly, now Illusionists can cast their illusion spells without requiring the verbal component, which not only lends itself so well to the flavor of the subclass, but also has some mechanical implications as well. If you were sneaking through a dungeon and wanted to place down a distraction, the casting of the spell could often give you away, but now you don't need to worry about that. This also means that it can work even if you're in an area under the effect of the silence spell. But even better now is that those distractions and illusions are more potent than ever, since the new feature also gives your illusion spells that have a range of at least 10 feet to be able to be extended by up to 60 feet. This is just such a huge buff to the subclass. There are now so many more situations that your illusions can be used, and so much more tactically as well. I love these changes. That also in combination with the fact that the 2024 Player's Handbook will also have a rules glossary, which will include so much more clarification and rules information about how illusions work and how to run them in your games. Next, at 6th level, the Malleable Illusion is gone, and that's fine. Now it's been replaced with the new feature, Phantasmal Creatures. Phantasmal Creatures gives the Illusionist both the Summon Beast and Summon Face spells, and always lets them be prepared. But in addition to that, if the character casts either of those two spells, they are able to, once per day, change the school of magic from Conjuration to Illusion, and if they decide to do that, the spell slot used to cast the spell is not expended. However, it cuts the hit points of the summoned creature in half. For clarity, they can still leave it as a Conjuration spell and expend the spell slot and keep the full hit points of the creature. This feature sounds so fun and versatile to me, and I am a huge fan of what it does. It also synergizes super well with Improved Illusions in that you don't need verbal components, and you can cast it at a much greater distance as well. Something they alluded to in the video in that when casting a spell without using a spell slot, it's always cast at the lowest level. So the illusion versions of these spells will at some point lose their relevance in combat, but they can still be used in a host of other situations, including distractions, some light attacking to pull groups away from a location, or even triggering traps. The 10th level feature, Illusory Self, has also been improved so that it no longer triggers when a creature makes an attack roll against you, but rather they specifically need to hit you with their attack, so now there is no possibility of wasting this feature. Additionally, you can restore a use of the feature by burning a spell slot of 2nd level or higher. And finally, they also confirmed as well that the 14th level feature, Illusory Reality, is not changing, and that's awesome since it's such a cool feature anyway that already works so well. I know this has been said a few times in these videos so far, but I'm gonna do it again. The changes to the Illusionist feel significant enough to consider the subclass to be a fundamentally new one. That is to say that if you've played an Illusionist in the past, your experience with this new version of it will absolutely feel substantially different than what you had previously. At the end of the day, the Wizard did not get a ton of changes, but to be honest, it didn't need a ton of changes. The class has been in a great spot for 10 years. The updates that come to the class, I do feel make it feel a bit tighter and better packaged than it was in 2014, but I think the lack of new toys for it will help other classes catch up a bit. That's not me saying that the Wizard still won't be the best class in 2024, we don't know that yet, but at least the gap likely won't be quite as large. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you like what I do and want to support me on that goal of 10,000 subs by the time the 2024 Player's Handbook comes out, a sub to the channel would be awesome. Check out some of my other D&D videos, but otherwise, take care.